Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan Raghavan.
Okay, Sharan, I think I have a theory now on behalf of the listeners of the podcast. The theory is that when you were in college, possibly some digital marketer either ragged you or broke up with you or, I don't know, did something to you for sure.
No. And thankfully, digital marketing wasn't around when I was in college. And I never might have dated them, but yeah, it never was around when I was in college.
You could have misguided people about your age if you would have said, no, nothing of that sort, though digital marketing was around when I was in college.
And they will believe me.
Correct. So the reason I say so is because every second or third episode, you find a way to go back to this topic or misconceptions that digital marketers have. And that's why I was asking, why, if they didn't beat you up when you were at college, why do you do that over and over again?
See, it's more frustration, right? It's frustration when you see your discipline of marketing, one being misunderstood, not just by individuals, but by multiple organizations. And also being misused in the digital era. And that is why I have this issue with what people call digital marketing. I honestly believe it's digital advertising. And actually, technically, the digital advertising management. It's not even advertising, but they're called digital marketers. That's where the problem starts.
Okay, fair. So now, how are you taking them on today?
Before I get into that, I have a question for you. Do you know of or have you heard of this person called Aijaz Khan?
Aijaz Khan, who is that?
So he was apparently a contestant on The Big Boss. And he has an Instagram following of 5.6 million. And he even recently contested in the Maharashtra Assembly elections.
That guy. Yeah. I know. He also had some drug cases against him also. Him or his family member is supposed to be some conduit or something. I don't know how much truth is there. But I think I know whom you're talking about. He got some 155 votes or something.
131 votes he got.
Okay, and what about him?
See, he's the perfect example of when you speak of the futility of vanity metrics.
Okay.
A massive follow account doesn't translate into the influence or meaningful outcomes that the person desires.
Fair. Yeah. You could say that, yes.
D2C brands or brands that call themselves D2C brands are doing exactly this. They chase vanity metrics like, say, follow accounts, likes, shares, but fail to translate those into sales. After all the hype, when they extend into general trade, they do not know who they're selling to. They do not know where they're selling. They dump their stock on distributors. The distributors are not able to sell them. And because the metrics weren't really genuine demand metrics from ground. And then the share prices plummet.
Okay. So I think the Aijaz Khan example possibly also says that their followers have come from a very different field.
Absolutely.
And they are irrelevant in politics, etc. But I see where you're going with this. There are enough people within politics, even some people in the Gandhi family, etc., who get a lot of views, impressions, crowd because of who they are, where they come from, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people will vote for them, even if their only claim to fame is politics or their family's claim to fame.
Absolutely. So this is what happens to brands when this performance marketing managers, right? They decide to chase these vanity metrics. They end up embedding, say, invisible links in an ad that pops up on your screen. So when you try to close it, it actually takes you to the landing page, which means nothing. But what does the review of the campaign say? This campaign got so many more click-throughs. But that's not true. People do not mean to click. There are different ways to game the system to chase the vanity metrics you want to chase. And that's where the problem is.
So fair seems like a straightforward argument. The question is, why do brands do this?
Because it's easy to measure. Forever, marketers have struggled with the point that marketing has not been immediately measurable. And now you have a digital version of promotions and activations, which is serenading as marketing and claiming to have immediate measurability. And people are buying into that narrative. And that is going on. Our brand manager is very proud to report millions of impressions and thousands of likes. But these numbers don't tell you that if people are interested in buying your product or not. Are they engaging with the intent to buy it in a meaningful way?
Although I must say, Sharan, there is some merit in these metrics. They indicate something. Maybe they're a reasonable indicator of initial attraction of your brand or initial relevance of your brand. But there is no way to tell whether this will translate into sales finally or not.
Absolutely. That's the truth. I mean, I acknowledge the truth in what you're saying, right? Because if you have large number of followers, it gives you a sense of credibility. But if you start building that only, then it becomes a dangerous game. If your strategy hinges on vanity metrics, then you are not really building a business. You're just building vanity metrics on a certain platform. And there are even some investors who will see through this and say, these are surface level numbers. People are not engaging and they're not buying from you. So it has to convert into sales now. And credibility itself comes from delivering the promises and not just looking good online, which is what a lot of the brands are doing today.
Okay. And so if you were to give them an advice, what should they be ideally looking after, or what should they be measuring? What would that be?
And should simply focus on actionable metrics. It starts with asking very, very simple questions. Are you looking for leads? Are you trying to build awareness? It all begins with setting your marketing objectives in place. Once you define that, then you know what success looks like.
Okay.
And you can track the metrics that align with your marketing objectives. It's as simple as that.
So if it is simple, why isn't it happening?
Because it requires discipline. It requires focus. It is, like I said, it's easier to chase numbers that look good. Impressions and visibility and engagement. But if your goal is to generate leads, track form submissions, track calls. If it's awareness, measure how they're engaging with you. As simple as that. It's primarily because people are incentivized by the digital ecosystem to chase the metrics the platforms want you to chase. That's where the problem is.
Okay. Although I must also say, Sharan, I've heard a lot of ads of many digital growth marketers or growth hackers, as they call themselves, and I've found some of them talking sensibly about making funnels or delivering funnels. So a lot of the vanity metrics that you are referring to is like the top of the funnel metric. How many people am I getting access to? How many people are viewing my content? And then if you really follow the funnel and if you understand the funnel of your consumer, that many of them view it, then many of them do something offline, some of them click and land somewhere, then there is some kind of bounce rate, then there is some add to cart, then there is some card abandonment. So, if you get the entire funnel and you are able to measure it through and through, then I think you are, possibly doing the right thing by the brand.
No, you're right. I'm not saying performance marketing is bad. I'm saying how we are going about it is a problem, because performance marketing by itself is a pretty powerful tool for you to leverage as a business.
Okay.
But it's often misused because instead of having a strategy for the brand that leverages a certain platform, brands are letting the platform's algorithm decide the tactics and how they want to use, how they must be performing on a platform. It's more putting the cart before the horse and saying, it's not that I have something to accomplish on this platform for my brand. It's more about, I want to be on that platform. What can my brand do to stand out on that platform? It's a very wrong approach to take.
But see, again, all these platforms provide you with those algorithms so that they could give you optimal results, right? So you can optimize either your leads or your conversions, whatever, or your impressions, whatever you want to optimize on. So that's what algorithm allows you to do. And I think that is why performance marketing works, right?
It does. See, algorithms are for efficiency, no doubt. but they are not strategic. So if Meta is designing a certain algorithm, it is not because it wants you to make more sales. It is for you to spend more money, ad spend on the platform. It's not Meta is not worried about your ROI. The brands need to take charge of the reins of what's happening on marketing for themselves. So I repeat, define your objectives very, very clearly. Ensure that the platform is serving your marketing objectives and not the other way around. You are not there to serve the platform's objectives. And algorithms are mere tools. And these algorithms are not your marketing director or your marketing manager. It's Facebook software.
No, fair. And I think, so if you, for example, if you trust the algorithm to do what it is designed for, and hence as a brand marketer, you possibly need to first know, what am I optimizing my algorithm for?
Absolutely.
Am I a very early stage brand, or I have a new news to tell, so therefore am I optimizing on impressions? Or am I somebody who is already looking for sales, etc.? Am I optimizing on leads?
Absolutely.
Or add to carts, or whatever you might call it. And so one is that. Number two, like you're saying, algorithm will optimize for it. But where your strategy comes into play is, you know your consumers best, you know your relationship, your brand's relationship with the consumer. So therefore, you know which creative will lead to what kind of funnel conversion.
Exactly.
And so therefore, that is where your strategic intent comes into play.
In fact, I have a further clarification.
Okay.
If you're a very new brand and you don't have these answers you're talking about, I don't know my consumer. I don't know what my consumer wants. I don't even know who my consumer is. At that stage, it's perfectly fine casting a very wide net.
Okay.
But learn quickly and start narrowing down your focus. You can't go after everybody all the time. We've spoken about this quite often, saying if you want to be something to everybody, you end up being nothing to anybody. So you need to find your audience. You need to understand them. So start wide. It's fine. When you do not have the answers, start wide. But be cognizant of the fact that this is costing you money. So start narrowing it down really fast. Don't let this wide net drag you down. Get your insights, narrow your targeting, and sharpen your mark.
So which means specifically around doing experimentation early, and then finding the bang on TG. The other thing that comes by, Sharan, too often, and I've heard it in different ways, is that because it is a fast-paced environment, things change. People say never say no to a good sale. So therefore, while you must know your TG, but you must also be agile enough to see where is the sale coming from, and therefore do I need to pivot, right?
True.
So how does one balance hyper clarity with agility?
They are not opposites. Agility does not mean you have to abandon clarity. It's about being clear, having a clear direction, while being flexible with your tactics. Once your strategy is in place, we've discussed this, what difference between strategy and tactics. If your strategy is in place, then your tactics can always change because you're going the same way. Just think of it like driving. You are going a certain route. You need to go to a certain destination. You take a route, it's got traffic jam or something, you take a different route, but you're still going to the same destination. The problem comes when you say, because this route is jammed, I'm going to go to another destination. That is when it starts going chaotic within marketing.
Okay, fair. So now, suppose you are going towards a route, you find a jam, right? And you find an issue. You want to now pivot. How should one do that?
Fast. If you realize you are in the wrong path, trying to persist there, if you're not finding a core insight for your consumer to accept what you're selling, a product or service, then it's no point just pushing forward with it and saying, because I've started this, I'm going to continue on this path. No. Be very quick in changing direction there. Because if you stay on a path knowing it's not succeeding, you're only going to drain your resources completely, which is where your casting a wide net and narrowing down comes into play. You might not land at the right answer the first go. Then again, broaden, find a better space, narrow down. So you need to gradually shift focus, because you don't just abandon one thing and jump to the other, but change your focus on who your target is, what you're talking to them. Keep checking it.
Okay, fair. One more bit quickly, Sharan, if I could ask you to touch on too. This whole pressure around promotions, performance marketing, etc., also comes from the fact that there are a lot of brands now fighting in each one of these spaces. A lot of D2C brands, yeah. You talk about coffee, you talk about something like a matrices, yeah, or organic food, cookies, etc. You name any, and there are multiple D2C brands now fighting that space apart from the legacy brands, right? So therefore, now each one of them want to either differentiate or die, as it is said. So therefore,
Trout.
they struggle, and within that struggle, then I think they come down to saying, let me try to attract the consumer by giving a hefty discount or spending a lot of money, and then hopefully the consumer would remember me and then will become a repeat consumer, right? What would you advise to these brands?
That's a great point. In fact, this lack of differentiation is used as a means for people to overspend on performance marketing a certain way without really building a brand. See, a lot of brands confuse standing out with being different. In fact, the Byron Sharp talks about it in his book, saying there is only so much of difference you can actually bring to the market. You want to bring that one aspect and you want to keep building it, building on it. You can do it to a certain extent, but after a point, consumers don't really care or even understand the minute difference. Especially, like you pointed out in FMCG, in a blind test, you might not be able to tell your own brand from a competition's. It's that close. Some people will swear they can. At least 5
But
out
they're
of 10
bluffing.
times, yeah, they'll be different. So it is not about just getting differentiated. It's about being distinctive from the competition and standing out.
No, fair. I think I understand what you're saying, which is about distinction versus differentiation.
Right.
And, to make it more clearer, what do you mean by distinction? If it is not differentiation, then what is it?
Okay. Differentiation is about trying to own some unique property within the category, saying this is what I stand for, which nobody else does. But that is the hard part. In a market where everybody is looking very similar to each other, that's difficult to do. So there are aspects that you can copy from others if you want. And like I think we've discussed this before, saying earlier, making something was difficult. Today, I can see something and figure a way to get it made. So that is not really a very distinctive, not a differentiator anymore. So you need to stand out in how you look, how you talk, how you present yourself as a brand, your colors, your identity, the language you use. How are you being distinct? Can you stand out from the category? A brilliant example for this is Attenborough, which spoke about power saving of fans. But I've met a few consumers in the category where nobody, not one consumer or customer of Attenborough is able to tell me how much power the Attenborough fan saves for them. They don't even know how much power a regular fan consumes first. So while that is the differentiation factor. And today, Havells, Crompton have all created equivalent products. But Attenborough stands out because they made fans a little cooler from the rest of the category. And their design stood out so well that people subconsciously wanted the Attenborough fans for the style and the design, but justified it with power saving. That is the
Fair.
distinction you have.
Possibly. In fact, one other example I would cite, Sharan, and I think a pertinent one here is from the your soft drink industry. There's hardly any differentiation between them. They're all carbonated, sweetened waters in different colors. So, but each one of them has found a niche in how they communicate. So Pepsi talks about youth or the in thing. Coke has a different language. Sprite, for a fair amount of time, they used to talk about सीधी बात no bakwas, clear hai.
Yeah.
Dew used to talk about डर के आगे जीत है. I think just the brand language
Without any product differentiation whatsoever.
Without any product differentiation. Correct. So I think there is a merit in saying, how do you stand out? How do you become distinct without really differentiating differentiation coming in. Now, in this one, the only risk that the brands have, that when you're creating a distinctive identity, you have to take care of the desirability also. So there are a lot of people who want to stand out. Now, instead of becoming outstanding, they really are made to stand out. I think that's one tricky part that the brands have in front of them.
And I'm glad you brought that point up, because this happens when you put the creative ahead of marketing and marketing strategy. Because performance marketing is putting the platform ahead of your strategy. This is putting your creative ahead of your strategy. But in your strategy, if you figure out what you're selling, to whom you're selling, why you're selling, what you're telling them, then your creative is given certain guardrails within which to operate. And that's how we get into the safe territory.
Correct. So cool. I think, Sharan, this was an interesting one. I think we were able to look beyond your obvious revenge-taking mechanisms against digital marketers.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan and Sudeep. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net.